Well, hello there. We're coming in on a wing and a prayer, folks. I hope you're having a great day. It is Monday, April 6, 2026, and this is the first season, because you're daggone right we're doing more than one, episode 29 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. As always, I am David the Nerd Emperor, and I will be your host for today. Hope you're having a decent Monday. Belated Happy Easter to you. Let's start off with the standard announcements. Hold on a minute, my mouse broke. Okay, hold on. There we go. All righty then. As always, you can follow us on not just Spotify, where we began. I should have this memorized by now. But on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio as well. Meanwhile, if you want to help us get better tech, you can donate through our Patreon page, which I'll mention in a minute. But really, I'd rather you sponsor us. We'll talk about that. And you can also donate through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same, WSPD Pod for War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons Podcast. We have a Patreon page for our subscribers, and it's as cheap as $3 for some of the premium content. That's patreon.com, patreon.com/WSP Dragons. You can get freebies plus special extra content, so check it out. The first 8 chapters of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now. The 8th chapter I scheduled to post in a couple of hours, so it's not quite 1 p.m. Eastern now, so it's going to pop up there in a couple more hours. The first chapter, to get you started with introducing the main character and sending him into the middle of a party, is available there for free. You can become a sponsor and read the rest as it comes out, as all my future works come out, for as little as that $3 a month. $3, guys, just $3, and you can support a writer. I'm not a reader, apparently. A writer who's been writing all his adult life, literally since I was 18 years old. The first job I ever had that was full-time with benefits was as a sports writer when I was 18. I had dropped out the previous fall on my 18th birthday, as I've mentioned in a prior podcast. Having a day, folks. In a prior podcast, on my 18th birthday, I dropped out of college, and I was majoring in journalism. So at the time, I was way ahead, but then the dumb kid gene kicked in, and I didn't stay way ahead. I ended up doing other things, but then came back into journalism and worked there for another 16 years after the first year I did it. So there you go. 4 million words in print, and some of them are even properly spelled, I'm proud to announce, thanks to my editor, Bill Hoffey. Hope you're doing well, Biffy. Anyway, as we usually do, we're going to start with war, and we're going to start with Trump's threat to basically blast the living crap out of everything Iran has. It's got liberals up in arms, which, of course, if he said nothing, they'd complain that he was being too silent. They're already doing that about Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and others. They're being too quiet. Why are they so quiet? Because we don't want to tell the enemy what's going on, because if we tell you, we're essentially telling the enemy. All right, most of the mainstream media now wants America to fail or look bad. At the very least, they want us to look bad. So why would you tell them anything until after you've done it? And, you know, they had no problem with Joe Biden, the hair sniffer, making Easter the trans people's day of visibility. So, day of visibility, what makes you think we want to look at you? Have you seen some of these dudes in dresses? Ugh. Come on, man. Oh, make my eyes burn. Anyway, we're going to move on a little bit into something a little more serious and less absurd. It's time for some chemistry and for some nuclear science. I hope you're ready to dip your toes into that. Are you ready? Yeah, me neither. Okay, let's talk about uranium enrichment. And what we're talking about now is the core reason behind the Trump administration and the Israelis going after Iran when they did. All right. Now, uranium is one of the 118, I want to say, elements on the periodic table. Now, the higher end elements, the higher the number, they tend to all have been synthesized in a lab, and they're not really naturally occurring. But science has allowed for their theoretical existence, and in some cases, like I said, there have been some of them made. They're not, the highest end ones are not theoretical and have never existed. They do exist, but again, they're not really commonly found in nature the higher up you go. Once you get basically above like 95, yeah, they're pretty rare. Uranium, however, is not as rare as, some of them. I lost my bookmark with periodic table of the elements on it. I used to know most of them. Yeah, uranium is 92. So it's getting up there close to the incredibly high size molecules or not size molecules, size atoms. Let me look real quick, see if I can get this periodic table up. Yeah, I mean, it's not like curium, named after Marie Curie, the noted Nobel Prize winning scientist, is number 96, is it? Yeah, curium's 96. Einsteinium is number 99. Nobelium is 102. Lawrencium is 103. Okay, so apparently there are 103. I thought there were... yeah, here we go. Yeah, there's nihonium, flerovium, moscovium, livermorium, tennessine. Tennessine is number 117. And oganesson. Oganesson is number 118. And I know precious little about it. It's a chemical element which has 118 protons and electrons, which they all, their atomic number, again, a reminder, is what the standard atom has in terms of protons and electrons. The number of neutrons, remember, in the nucleus you have your proton and your neutron. The electron orbits the nucleus and provides the electrical charge, positive or negative. Yeah, the chemical symbol for oganesson or oganesson is capital O lowercase g, and it has a weight of 295. So that means there are 177 neutrons normally occurring in one atom of that element. Okay, the atomic weight is basically, to determine the atomic weight of something, is you add in the neutrons to the number of protons, and that's how much the atom weighs. Like, for instance, naturally occurring hydrogen has a weight of 1. It has 1 proton, 1 neutron, and 1 electron. Because the neutron has the overwhelming majority of the weight. Doesn't it? No, wait a minute. I don't know. We'll get back into that. I got C's in chemistry and I haven't used it, so I'm losing the knowledge and it pisses me off. And by the way, real quick segue about that whole, do you know how long it's been since high school? I don't know if I've gone off on a little rant about this before, but guys, I never want to hear anyone say, you know how long it's been since high school? When I ask them a question, I tell you why. It's because your high school diploma is proof that you know something. It is not carte blanche to forget it. Okay? The knowledge was given you and taught to you so that you would have an application for it in the future. Now, granted, I don't use trigonometry a whole lot. I don't use chemistry terribly much. But I still have that knowledge, and if I need it, it's still there. Now, of course, as you can tell, I'm a little rusty on my chemistry. But hey, I got B's in it. So, well, I had one term I got a D. Yeah, I got a D. That was the term I was in a car crash, and yeah, I had missed some time, and yeah. We won't talk about that. But anyway, okay, so here's the deal. Here's the main reason that Trump and Netanyahu decided that February 28th was the time to strike. For one thing, if you're going to do something that the Europeans are going to get pissed off about, do it after 3 p.m. on Friday or on a weekend, because they work banker's hours. They don't accomplish a whole hell of a lot when they do work, and that way, they won't go back to work until Monday. That's why I didn't hear anything really from the international community about the February 28th initial strikes until Monday, March 2nd, is because the Euro trash that are the bureaucrats running the EU didn't bother taking any time out of their weekend off to contribute to society. So anyway, the reason for the attack was real simple. It was known by the intelligence community and others that the IRGC had achieved a 60% level of enrichment with uranium. What that meant is the stockpiles of uranium that they had, by and large, were comprised of 60% U-235. Now, that is the most radioactive isotope, I believe, of uranium. What's found most commonly is U-238, which is a slight bit heavier, obviously. It's got 3 more neutrons. But the isotope U-235 is the one that's really of use for a variety of things. We're about to get into that exactly. Now, the thing about it is when you get uranium enriched to 60%, guess what the time frame is to get it from 60% to 90%? Now, 90% or greater is what's considered weapons-grade uranium. Weapons-grade uranium is the stuff that is put into a nuclear weapon. Okay? You know the kind. Stronger than the ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A nuclear weapon rather than an atomic weapon does far more damage. And not today, I don't have time, but we'll get into the distinction between nuclear and atomic sometime down the road. But nuclear is basically the next step past atomic, as I recall. So, the Iranian Republican Geek Council, whatever the hell it stands for, IRGC, whatever. Sorry. Dude, I just woke up. I'm finally catching up on my sleep. Yay! So, forgive me if I'm a little groggy, but I wanted to get this started. Anyway, 60% enrichment is where they were. So they were within 2 weeks of having 90% enrichment. Okay, fine. So they have 90% enrichment and they can make a nuclear weapon. Well, how far could they send it? Well, that's the thing, is on the 20th of March, I believe it was, the IRGC fired 2 rockets, 2 long-range missiles at Diego Garcia, which is a small island base that America uses in the Indian Ocean. And it was over 2,000 miles, I believe, from Iran, which proved, as I've mentioned in a previous podcast, that Iran had intermediate range ballistic missile capability. So they could conceivably reach as far out as, say, 2,500 miles. I gave you the list of world capitals that Iran could hit with those weapons if they so aimed them there. It included London, it included Paris, it included Rome, it included Moscow, it included Delhi, the capital of India, it included Cairo, Egypt, it included Algiers, the capital of Algeria. Okay? I think they could reach Rabat, the capital of Morocco, which is on the western coast of Africa. They could reach Stockholm, Sweden, Warsaw, Poland, Berlin, Germany, every country in Europe. Okay? Most countries in Asia. Many countries in Africa. And is that what you wanted them to have? Really? While they're running protesters down with cars and hanging them, stoning them, and shooting them in the streets? I'm going to go ahead and say that Trump had finally said, okay, screw this, let's go. And so he and Netanyahu combined efforts and went after the IRGC. And now the people are starting to rise up. I'm hearing reports now of popular uprisings, gunfire being exchanged between the civilians and the IRGC Islamofascist scumbag thugs. So, more power to them. Javid Shah and free Iran. I hope it works out. And deep down, I think it will. And of course, each day that goes by, the liberals are complaining, why isn't the war over? Why isn't the war over? Well, we're sorry we couldn't drag you into a 19-year quagmire like you guys did with Vietnam. Okay? But Trump doesn't tend to like a long war. Okay? Let's just admit that. Now, let's talk about levels of uranium enrichment. Now, normally, with uranium from basically 5 to 20%. Okay, if uranium naturally occurs at 0.7% enrichment, that's when it's dug out of the ground. So that means that about 1 out of every 140 uranium atoms is U-235, which is the highly radioactive stuff that we're talking about now. 3 to 5% is what's part of low enriched uranium, and 3 to 5 is under what's called low enriched uranium, actually. 3 to 5% enriched uranium is what comprises nearly all commercial nuclear reactor fuel. So if there's a nuclear power plant near you, the reactor fuel for it, the uranium is probably 3 to 5% enriched. Okay, now LEU, or low enriched uranium, is from 5 to 20%, according to the standards for uranium enrichment. By the way, you guys, if you want, you can look this up on the U.S. Department of Energy's website. There's plentiful notes about it. There's all kinds of other stuff out there on the internet. This is not hard stuff to find out. Okay, a very simple Google search. If you understand what the concept of a keyword is, then you can accomplish a lot of research. It didn't take me long to find all this stuff. So there are three major methods by which uranium is enriched. Okay, there's gas diffusion, there's gas centrifuges, and there's laser enrichment. Now, gas diffusion, basically, they mix uranium with fluorine and create something called uranium hexafluoride. The molecular symbol for that is UF6. Okay, so there's 6 fluorine atoms for every uranium atom. The gas comes out, and it's basically goes through filters. The filters filter out the U-238, which is slightly heavier, and gives you a higher enrichment level of U-235 because some of the U-238, as I said, gets caught in the filters. That's how gas diffusion enrichment works. For the sake of this discussion, I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but that's pretty much how it works. Now, centrifuges, anybody who's ever worked in a lab, anybody remembers that from chemistry class, a centrifuge spins, and it spins at a high rate of speed. And when it does, the heavier stuff falls to the bottom of the container in the centrifuge. And so the U-238 will fall toward the bottom of the container of the centrifuge, and the U-235 will be slightly above it, and it's separated that way. Now, the stuff that's more U-238, that, where almost all of the U-235 is filtered out, is called depleted uranium. Now, I'm sure you may have heard that term before if you know much at all about our modern military. Our military uses depleted uranium in a variety of capacities. For instance, for one thing, it's 1.7 times as dense as lead. All right. The symbol for lead, of course, being Pb for the Latin word plumbum. So it's 1.7 times as dense as lead. Depleted uranium is used in the following things. It's used in the GAU-8 Gatling gun, the 30 millimeter rounds that are fired from the A-10 Warthog ground support plane. It's used as part of the armor layer on M1 Abrams tanks. It's also used in some bunker-busting bombs, such as the B-61. Now, the B-61 is what they call a dial-yield bomb, and it is a nuclear arm, or is capable of being that. All right? Now, the third method of enrichment, there are others being experimented with, but I'm not going to go into those right now. The third main method for enrichment is laser enrichment. So again, it involves uranium hexafluoride gas, UF6, is shot through a channel in a chamber, and a specially tuned laser blasts the atoms with an extra proton. And what that does is it causes the U-235 to migrate out of the stream of uranium hexafluoride and into a separate chamber where it's collected. Okay, and again, anything about 20% or higher isn't really for industrial or civilian use, except for a few cases, like top of my head, there's one called molybdenum 99, which is used for medical stuff, and we'll discuss that maybe some other time. I don't know much about molybdenum 99. But the levels of enrichment are labeled as such. There's LEU, which we've discussed, which is low enriched uranium, 5 to 20%. And again, nearly all commercial reactor fuel is only 3 to 5% enriched. LEU plus, low enriched uranium plus, which is basically what they're doing with LEU plus is they're using it to enhance the performance of what are called light water reactors. I'll tell you what light and heavy water reactors are in just a second. LEU plus prolongs the lifetime of the fuel in a reactor and cuts down on the number of times you have to basically reload it with fission fuel or put more U-235 in it. Okay, then you have HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium. It includes LEU plus. It's designed for some of the higher output to basically to increase the output a step further, to lengthen the life cycle of the reactor, and again, to have a higher level of efficiency. Then, once you get above 20%, realistically, you're looking at highly enriched, and that's used in things like the power plants for nuclear submarines and for our top-of-the-line aircraft carriers and for some other ships too. It's used in basically naval propulsion reactors. And it's also used in research-related reactors. But once you get very far above 20%, you're basically trying to work your way toward weapons-grade uranium. Now, real quick, what are light water reactors versus heavy water reactors? A light water reactor, very simple, uses regular old H2O, the kind of stuff that comes out of your tap at the kitchen sink. And what that does is it moderates the neutron activity to control the level of fission. So if you reduce the amount of water, there's more fission and more reactivity. And if you increase it, it kind of dilutes it. Water is a great diluent for that. It dilutes pretty much everything. And it's also used to take away heat. Okay, so it's used as a coolant. Heavy water reactors use what is called heavy water. Heavy water, very simple, is instead of regular hydrogen, it's deuterium. Deuterium is hydrogen 2, is how you would describe it. What deuterium is hydrogen with an extra an extra neutron, I'm sorry. So it has twice the atomic weight of regular hydrogen, and it's used in the same way as light water. And it's used, like I said, it's used to moderate the neutron activity in the reactive core, as well as to control the fission and to remove heat, so as a coolant. So that's your main difference, is light water reactors use regular water, heavy water reactors use deuterium oxide, which is itself a little bit radioactive. A little bit, I think, but not terribly much. Now, tritium is hydrogen 3, and that's more rare. That's a little bit more radioactive, and that's a discussion for another day. So here's the thing. To take, as I said, to take uranium from 60 to 90% enrichment takes just 2 weeks. So the U.S. and Israeli forces hit Iran on February 28th. So in theory, if they hadn't, by St. Patrick's Day, the IRGC could have had enough weapons-grade uranium to put on the tip of a missile and fire it at London or Paris or Berlin or Diego Garcia or Delhi or Cairo or Moscow or Stockholm or Algiers or Tunis or Rome. And I don't think we want that. Okay, remember, it was negotiation and talk and weakness that got Iran to where it was in its enrichment program. All that the Obama administration did was send them pallets of cash. And they talked about this and that, but when you're dealing with hardcore Islamists, you need to remember one little tenet of their faith, and it's called taqiyya. Taqiyya is how I've seen it most commonly spelled in English. And what that is it's the Muslim practice of deceit. What it means is a Muslim can basically say whatever they want to an infidel because they're in the furtherance of jihad in so doing. So they can lie to us whenever they want. So their entire religious ecosystem is predicated on deceiving those who aren't believers. How can you negotiate in good faith with somebody whose entire life has revolved around lying to people who aren't of the same faith? And it comes down to this. Who would you trust more? The Iranians, who've been waging war with us asymmetrically for 47 years? Really? Because if you do trust them more, then you're a freaking moron. And we're just going to leave it at that. So that's a little bit of the whys and the wherefores of things that are going on over there. Real quick, let's go over congratulations and thank you to the U.S. military for the mission they undertook. I'm not going to mention the units involved because you've probably already heard about them anyway. That rescued the 2 downed airmen, I guess it was a pilot and an RIO, from an F-15 that got shot down, I want to say Friday. That the second member of the crew was found. The first one was found fairly quickly, and then it took about 48 hours to find the second one. And I've seen footage of an area nearby where he was found, wherein Iranian civilians used their cars and their bodies to block traffic to help impede the efforts of IRGC forces from getting to him before our forces got to him. So the Iranians are not just standing by and idly watching. They are actively helping. They're calling in coordinates of IRGC checkpoints and forces to help facilitate airstrikes. And I'm telling you now, the time's coming. It's not far away. This time next month, we could be talking about Shah Pahlavi again. I think it's coming soon. I don't know a time frame. Well, I can tell you a time frame, but it'll probably be wrong. And we'll see. We're just waiting it out. To provide further context, Iran has a higher population now than Germany had in World War II. And it's a far larger country. So there's a lot more vermin to root out, more cutlets to create, is what the Iranian civilian call the IRGC members who assume room temperature. They call them cutlets. So here's to more cutlets. Good luck to our military. Thanks for your job so far. And people complaining about an F-15 being shot down. We've had one plane apparently shot down out of 20,000 or so sorties. If we had that ratio in World War II, it would have ended 2 years early. Okay? So, calm down. Again, you can't win a war in the time it takes you to cook chili in a crock pot. It takes a while, especially when you're dealing with heavily embedded cockroaches. Sometimes the exterminator has to dig fairly deep. Moving on to sports now. Jeez. I want to talk about the Orioles, but part of me doesn't. I'm almost afraid to. When we talked Friday, it was just before their first game of a 3-game set at Pittsburgh. And I didn't go into detail, by the way, about why Pittsburgh's first pitch was at 4:12 p.m. Real quick, let's go over that. Pittsburgh has decided that the first pitches for a lot of their home games are going to be at 4:12 p.m. to honor the 412 Pittsburgh area code. So if you're calling somebody who lives in Pittsburgh, odds are they live within the 412 area code. So that's why they're doing that. Now, let's see if we did that in other cities. Well, in L.A., part of L.A. is 213, so I guess their games would be what? 2:13 p.m. New York City is 2:12, so they play at 2:12. Baltimore is 4:10, which is what time those games would start. So most of the major cities that have sports franchises, the times would be earlier in the afternoon and fairly reasonable. So that's not a terribly bad idea. It's a novel concept. But the only problem I had with the Orioles playing the Pirates this weekend was the fact that the freaking Orioles managed to get swept by the Pirates. And this is the first time in the regular season, actually, or the postseason, that a Pittsburgh team has swept a Baltimore team in a 3-game series since 1893. Okay, now granted, the Baltimore Orioles did not exist as a team in the major leagues until 1954, but there have been pro-Baltimore teams in the past, and there was a Baltimore Orioles team back in the early 1900s. What happened to create the Baltimore Orioles as we know them, of course, was when the St. Louis Browns moved to Baltimore after the 1953 season and became what were called then the Baby Birds. So that's, yeah, it's a little disconcerting. But again, the overwhelming majority of that 133-year interval, the teams didn't have the capacity to play one another at the major league level. But that's just a stat that, oh, God, you don't want to hear it. So now, after a 2-1 start, the Orioles are 3-6. They have lost 5 of their last 6 games. Now, I'm still adopting a wait-and-see attitude. I stand by my claim that I think they'll go 88-74. But if they don't get it together in the next week, I don't know. If we come into next week and they're 7 games down the road, they're like 6-10 or 5-11, then yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug on my optimism. And at that point, I'm going to start ragging on people whose tweets I have bookmarked, because I just dug up a couple. And, one guy said, hope you have that same energy because they're going to be doing well in July, and I'll be right. Okay, buddy. If you say so. Moving on real quickly to politics, we're going to talk about the Artemis II situation. Is in addition to the space toilet having problems, there is some trouble with the Windows software apparently on the capsule that has been, I believe, rectified. But they've had problems trying to get the toilet to clear because of ice in the system. And of course, you got to remember, so when you're watching the Guardians of the Galaxy movie and you see the Space Lord activate his little device where he puts a mask over his face so he can breathe, and it's over his eyes and all. What you got to understand is outside that mask, the temperature is absolute zero. So he would freeze almost instantly if he was exposed to outer space. So if you're not in an area that is climate controlled in outer space, the temperature is something like, 400 degrees below zero? I forget what it is. 0 degrees Kelvin, I think, is what it is, and it's freaking cold, baby. So, imagine frozen poop, frozen pee-pee, clogging it up. Oh God, it's horrible to contemplate, and I really hope that they can get the mission done. It would, I can tell you this: on future missions, I don't think they're going to have that issue. So hopefully, down the road when there's an Artemis III or an Artemis IV, that the space pooper will not be, pardon the pun, all crapped up. I hope that things go well for those guys. They're now, on day 6, I guess? Wrapping up day 5, day 6 of their 10-day mission. So they're halfway along on their mission. I wish them all the best. And when we go on Friday for our podcast, they'll be just about done at that point, and we'll know, how things have gone to a further extent. Heading over to, and there's some other political things I wanted to talk about, but I just, I don't have it in me today. I don't have it in me. I'm not awake enough to get into a sour mood quite yet. People, I used to joke with people years ago and say, well, you guys need coffee when you get up. All I need when I get up is to think of something that pisses me off, and I'm good and alert. Well, I don't do that anymore. Moving on to dragons, my favorite subject of the 4. We're going to go back to the 30-day D&D challenge. I only did the first 2 days over a couple of podcasts in the past. I tell you what I'll do is we'll make this a Monday thing. Every Monday podcast we'll do 30-day D&D challenge. So for this one and 27 more Mondays, we'll talk about the D&D challenge. So day 3 is name your favorite player character class, and I've got to go with Wizard. They are kind of weak at the lower levels, but they can become absolutely unstoppable at the higher levels. Some of them, if they're played well, you can't get near them, you can't hurt them. And you think about this. A 3rd level wizard can get the web spell, so you can cast a huge spider web, basically, and stick your opponents in a given position. At 5th level, you can cast the spell Fireball. So combine the two. Oh, by the way, webs are flammable in the game, these webs. So I've done this to parties of characters that I've dungeon mastered. Is they come into a given area and bang, they're hit with a web, and then poof, they're hit with a fireball the very next round, because the web kind of sticks them in place, and if they're immobilized, it harms their ability to make a proper saving throw to roll a die to get out of or minimize the damage. Then factor in a spell like Improved Invisibility. Now, regular invisibility, you are not seen until you commit some kind of overtly hostile act. If you attack someone, that kind of thing. And sometimes if you reach out to touch someone who's not considered a friend, that's considered an attack, at which point your invisibility ends. Well, with improved invisibility, it doesn't work that way. You can still stay invisible and do all the things that you do. So imagine a 5th level wizard, because he would have access to web, to improved visibility, I believe that's a 3rd level spell, and to the spell Fireball. I'm looking that up right now. This guy could literally buzz around and blast people, web them up, fireball them, and not even be seen. So not only are you basically frying your opponents, they don't even know where the hell you are. I'm looking up the spell right now. Let me see what I can find. Excuse me. So again, Wizard is definitely my favorite class. I'm looking it up right now. Enchantment. 3rd level, maybe it's a 4th level spell. Let's look. Illusion, Greater Invisibility. Yeah, there it is. So it's called Greater Invisibility in 3rd edition. I'm going by the term from prior to 3rd edition, which was Improved Invisibility. So you would have to be, basically, it's double the spell level -1 is the character class level you have to be in order to cast spells at a certain level. So what that means is to cast a first level spell, you need to be 2 times first level -1. So you need to be 1. In order to cast a second level spell, you need to be 2 times 2, 4, -1, 3. You need to be third level. So basically at every odd numbered character level, you gain another spell level. So at 5th, you can cast 3rd level spells. At 7th, you can cast 4th. At 9th level, you can cast 5th level spells, and so on and so forth. So imagine a guy who has access to greater invisibility, fireball, which is 3rd level, web, which is, I believe, 2nd level. Yep. That can be pretty formidable. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why I love wizards, is not just for their destructive capabilities, but also you have this one subclass of wizard called diviners, where they can find out just about anything you need to know. And in my campaign world of Trinith, in the game world that's being used for the production of tabletop RPG goodies that are in the pipeline, there is a guild of diviners called the Sender Mages, and they work for banks. And what they basically do is use a spell called Sending, where you can send a 25-word message to anyone on that plane of existence. And then that person has the option of replying to the message. And then, of course, I've tweaked it and added another degree to the spell. And there's a greater sending, and so on and so forth. I won't get into all of that. You'll have to read about that in the books. But basically what they do is they're sort of like an internet for financial transactions, basically, a banker's web, where, if you're in Esternon, the capital of Omeron, and you want to send money down to the Coastal Confederacy several hundred miles away, you would find a bank that has branches in both, and go in and, present your money, or if you already have it there, just tell them, hey, I've got to move some money. And they would say, okay, I'll hand this to a Sender Mage, and the Sender Mage would then cast the spell, and a Sender Mage at the appropriate bank branch elsewhere would get the information instantaneously, and boom, there you go. And they have a very shortened technical code that they use to cover the transfers, kind of like binary, but not really binary. Yeah, so it's very highly sophisticated. You can do so much with magic in the game that people don't really realize they can do. For other people, using sending spells is, well, I can't find my other friends in the dungeon. Let me send them a message and tell them where I'm at. Yeah, that's all well and good, and that works too. But I'm trying to think beyond the box here, and that's what you want to do when you're dungeon mastering. So there's a dungeon master tip for you as well. Now, let's get into anecdotal evidence. Let me get over here on Twix and find some funny stuff to read for you. Excuse me. Apparently I've woken up with a little bit of a sinusy thing going on. Child, hold on. Oh, we're having a time today. Yeah. The internet, the web interface for Twix is a little bit different. So, okay, here we go. This is from John A. Conrad IV, and it's talking about the recent Trump threats to leave NATO. And here's a very good way of describing the situation. Okay, his Twitter handle is JOHNKONRAD, John Conrad. Here we go. NATO is in far bigger danger than anyone realizes, and the reason has nothing to do with defense budgets. The real danger is psychological. It's cultural. Europeans don't just free ride on American security for 80 years. They built an entire identity around the idea that they evolved past the Americans protecting them. That identity is now the single biggest obstacle in Western survival, and the darkest irony is we helped build it. After World War II, Europe wasn't just economically shattered. Its culture was in ruins. The cities, the universities, the concert halls, the museums were all rubble. Not to mention, let's add in here, by the way, I'll throw this in, is the Nazis stole hundreds of millions, billions in today's money, of dollars worth of works of art, whether it was statues, paintings, furniture, clothing, jewelry, all manner of things. They pillaged every country that they overran. And there's actually a movie called The Monuments Men that is dedicated to a brief, look into efforts by the Allies to recover some of this stuff after World War II. And it was a huge effort. There was stuff, they had millions and billions of dollars buried in salt mines, a couple hundred yards underground in some places. They stored it in all manner of places. So not just were the places where you could enjoy the cultural items destroyed, the cultural items themselves had been hidden or destroyed as well. So anyway, back to this discussion. The Marshall Plan rebuilt the economy, but culture wasn't a priority, not at first. Then the Iron Curtain dropped, and suddenly culture became a weapon. American diplomats, academics, artists, and scholars flooded Western Europe. We funded their universities, supported their orchestras, rebuilt their museums, promoted their intellectual life. Not because European culture needed saving for its own sake, but because Eastern Europeans were struggling for Maslow's most basic needs. We needed the view from the other side of the wall to be intoxicating. So America built Western Europe into a showcase of self-actualization. Art, philosophy, cafe culture, long vacations, universities where people studied literature instead of surviving. We were manufacturing jealousy. And it worked. The wall came down. But here's what no one accounted for. When you give a society self-actualization on someone else's tab long enough, they forget it was a gift. They start believing it was organically theirs. And when they look at the country that funded it all, a country busy building aircraft carriers and semiconductor fabs and shale fields instead of reaching Maslow's pinnacle. An overweight American in a ball cap who can't tell Monet from Pizarro, who eats fast food, who drives a truck, who builds strip malls instead of piazzas. And to a culture trained in aesthetics but stripped of strategic awareness, that American looks uncivilized. So the arrogance takes root. And once a culture decides another is beneath them, they stop listening. Americans say wars are sometimes necessary. Well, they consider that crude. Oil is the backbone of prosperity. Well, that's unsophisticated. Kids building companies in garages at reshaping the planet, that's crass to them. Wall Street financing the global economy, well, they consider that vulgar. Europe has no world-class technology sector, no military capable of strong defense, no energy independence, dear God, no. And no AI capacity. What Europe has is culture. The culture we paid for at the expense of us reaching Maslow's pinnacle. For decades, that was fine. We funded the museums, protected the sea lanes, and tolerated the sneering because the arrangement worked. Then Europeans stopped keeping the contempt private. They started saying it to our faces, in their media, in their parliaments, at every international forum. Americans are stupid, Americans are violent, Americans are a threat to democracy. We could have moved the Louvre to New York. We could have built a Venice here. We could have stolen your best artists, designers, philosophers, and more, like your conquering armies did for centuries. Instead, we funded them, and all we asked for in return was to let us visit. You don't have the military to defend your borders. You don't have the technology to compete. You don't have the energy to heat your homes without begging dictators. And that is true. That's the fact right now. Okay? Much of Europe is getting its natural gas from Vladimir Putin. What you have is an 80-year superiority complex funded by Americans, protected by American soldiers, and built on the false belief that self-actualization is civilization. It isn't. Civilization is the ability to sustain itself. By that measure, Europe isn't a civilization at all. It's a dependency with better wine. That's not a threat. It's a weather report. Build a navy, or don't. But stop lecturing the people that made you better than us. Our crudeness, our stunted liberal education, our ugly strip malls are because we sacrificed our culture to support yours. And there you have it. Here's one from Eric S. Raymond real quick. It's ERS tweet. And it, again, is about NATO. And this is just another hello Europeans. It's basically another open letter to Europe. Hello Europeans. The first thing you need to understand about the rant I'm about to utter is that I'm not MAGA, not a Trumpite, but a libertarian who has in the past nevertheless been strongly supportive of U.S. military presence overseas, because I want the wars that defend this country to be fought in somebody else's country, as far away from me as possible, with a nice big ocean in the way. Also relevant, I have a history of having lived in Europe and having traveled there extensively. I was at one time bilingual in English and Spanish, and have been passably fluent in Italian and French as well. I could probably still find my way around London and Rome and central Paris reasonably well. So if you're tempted to tell yourselves I'm some kind of parochial American hick, abandon that hope. All that was set up so that when I tell you that almost the entirety of the U.S. electorate, not just Trump supporters, is increasingly fed up with your shit, take me seriously. We've been cleaning up your messes and keeping the sea lanes open since 1917. And that was for you, not us. We, being very close to resource self-sufficient, don't need that investment so much. We've spent enormous amounts of blood and treasure on keeping you safe. We risked nuclear hellfire on our own cities for nearly 50 years to keep Soviet tanks from rolling through the Fulda Gap. Even since the Cold War ended, we've subsidized your socialist playpen welfare states and disastrous immigration policies by taking the need to maintain militaries more effective than a sack of wet farts off the table. Now we've come looking for help keeping a bunch of rabid Islamic fanatics from getting nuclear weapons that are a clear and present danger to all of you, even more than they are to us. And what do we hear? Well, it's another Republican president we don't like, just like the last half dozen of them. So we're going to sulk in a corner, except when we're biting at your ankles with crap like airspace restrictions. No, we're not going to take this anymore. It's not just conservatives who've had enough. It's moderates and people who used to be strong supporters of liberal internationalism. Our citizens' willingness to pay higher taxes to protect you was upward bounded by your gratitude. Now that we know your gratitude has effectively gone to zero, so does our willingness. Don't expect this to change if the Democrats take power here. They're much less liberal internationalists than Republicans now. While they might make mouth noises that soothe you, their overriding concern is the gaping, insatiable maw of their income transfer programs. They'll sacrifice subsidizing Europeans' playpen socialism to feed their domestic version in a heartbeat. And there's no longer any significant Democratic constituency to argue against that. In truth, 3 decades after the Cold War ended, there is no American constituency at all for the massive subsidies you get. It frankly surprises me they lasted this long, that we were this patient with your cowardice and your bitchy whining. The moment has been a long time coming. It's not Donald Trump sinking this transatlantic alliance. It is absolutely you. And the fact that these NATO countries failed, by and large, every year to pony up their pledged amount of financial contribution to the alliance, well, that's just more grist for that mill. And, well, the bill's about to come due. The Europeans can't pay it, but they're going to have no choice. So, remember, you need us every bit as much as we need you, probably more so. Now, I did find something else online here because I geek out on Twitter a good deal. There's an account called 2001 Live. Its handle is 25 years ago live. Here's something you never read in the papers 25 years ago. A comprehensive recount of 2000 election Florida ballots conducted by the Miami Herald and USA Today, now this was in 2001, reveals that President Bush, that would be W. Bush, still would have won Florida, and not by the 537 votes as is widely reported, but by 1,665. So by 3 times as wide a margin. Now, it's still a very thin margin, but he still would have won. Now, I once heard that there were a total of 19 recounts that had taken place, and that all of them had gone in favor of W. I don't believe that. I do, however, believe that there was at least one. And we won't talk about how the New York Times accidentally called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization the North American Treaty Organization, because they're already struggling enough and we don't need them to, you know. Somebody just told me that the Orioles are good this year. Bookmark this. Okay. I did, and I said, okay, we'll talk again in July. So let me go ahead and bookmark that. There we go. Computer's acting up. Internet must be bored. It feels like messing with me all of a sudden. But folks, that's all I've got for today. It's a little bit shorter than normal. We're coming in around 50 minutes. So I'm going to wrap it up. I won't bore you anymore. But thanks again for listening for this long. I do appreciate it. Again, final thought is what I opened with in the last podcast. Go find your kids. Give them a hug. Tell them you love them. If you can't hug them, call them and tell them that you love them. It's okay to do it more than once, honestly. They are your purpose. And love is not true unless it's unconditional. And yes, even bad kids have parents that love them. Hopefully. But let's wrap it up. Let's make sure to follow us on Twitter as well as on the different platforms for the podcast. The handle on Twitter is at the WSPD Podcast. No affiliation with the Winston-Salem, North Carolina Police Department or WSPD Radio in Toledo, Ohio, but thanks for playing. On TikTok, it's all one big word, WSP Dragons. There's stuff coming on TikTok down the road, but it's not a priority because I'm not a fan of TikTok, and most of the stuff on there is so incredibly vacuous I can't handle it. But anyway, there's not enough time in the day, so whatever. Even when I wasn't sleeping, there wasn't enough time in the day. You can help sponsor us through our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/WSPDragons. Join us there. You can always help us upgrade our equipment via Cash App and Venmo at both its WSPD-POD, WSPD Pod. And as always, listen on Spotify where we began. Please follow us there, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. And on YouTube, you can find us there as well. The WSPD Podcast. Just look for War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons. And we're on there. Right now, what it's doing is it's porting over the podcast to YouTube. So all you have is the audio podcast on there now. And I did a couple of shorts a while back. I need to do more of them. I actually enjoy doing shorts on YouTube, but I don't like TikTok. I don't know. Maybe it's the Chinese spyware thing. But in any event, that's going to do it for today. Hope you guys had a good Easter. He is risen. Praise be to the Lord. And everyone, take care of yourselves. Be well. For those of you that will be on hand for Wednesday's special members only thing on Patreon, I'll talk to you then. For the rest of you, I will talk to you Friday. And consider becoming a Wednesday Gang member. It would be greatly appreciated. Take care. This is Dave the Nerd Emperor signing off. Who loves you, baby?